Hi, everyone. I'm Brad Heinrichs, MCBC Finance Committee Chair, and I want to talk about the proposed financial management plan. Just a bit of background, the Peardonville Fund was obtained by the sale in 2024, netting about $5.5 million. Decision was made to split that into three sort of buckets, 10% towards Indigenous relations, 10% towards MCBC operations, and 80% towards growth and revitalization. A 3-year funding formula was approved where the 10% Indigenous relations was sort of used as needed. The 80% for church revitalization and church planting, the formula was to use interest from investment and $100,000 from principal. And then about $100,000 a year could be drawn from the 10% for MCBC operations to fund 2 half-time salaries. So I just want to take a look at the way that the income and expenses are working at MCBC right now. The last 5-6 years here, those are the individual and church donations. And 2025 was the first year where most of the year had invested funds from the Peardonville monies, and in aggregate, all the 10%, 10%, and 80% made almost $350,000 in growth. Of course, it hasn't been locked in, hasn't been sold, but that's the growth there. So it's a significant amount of income for the conference. And on the other side of the ledger, the expenses, this isn't everything, but just want to show the major expenses, salaries and the disbursements. So disbursements are things like the revitalization grants, like the Indigenous relations work, CBC, nationwide ministries, all these things that we just pass money through church plants. Now, something else that we got to keep in mind here is the effect of inflation on money that you have invested. So it was great that we have this income from the Peardonville funds, but last same period, inflation was about 20% over COVID. It's come down now, but inflation has to be figured into some of these things. So if for example, you had $5 million invested, if you want that $5 million to stay at sort of $5 million, you've got to put 100,000 back in to counter 10 or 2% inflation. So I ran some numbers to show what the Peardonville funds would be like under the current spending and different other spending regimes. So this here shows what I've called a foundation balance, which is the 10% for MCBC operations and the 80%, not the 10% Indigenous. And this is my estimate that would have about $4.7 million remaining in those two funds at the end of the current 2026 budget, so in 2027. So with the proposed spending in 2026, if that scaled with the inflation over time, the amount that has to be drawn from those funds in order to fund that spending means that the funds would run out at about 2040, 2039, depending on your assumptions. So that's that red line. Another proposal might be to have the funds stay there and only take the interest earned. So assuming that you're doing that, here's sort of the real dollar value. So in 2027 dollars of the fund. So even though you'd have $4.7 million in there the whole time, what that fund would be worth would decrease. And also your effective spending would have to decrease because you'd be getting the same amount of money off of it every year, but that money would be worth less. The same that the $10 for lunch now is not the same as $10 for lunch 10 years ago. And then the other level of spending would be where you could do that reinvestment to preserve the real value of the fund. So at about $520,000 of spending, you can draw money from the fund in order to finance that spending, still getting donations and whatnot. But if with the reduced spending, you could keep that going sustainably. So there's a resolution number 8 in the agenda for the meeting that proposes combining the 80% and 10% for MCBC operations into an MCBC foundation, more of an endowment model for funding than the current one, or the one expiring in 2026. The Indigenous Relations 10% is not considered part of this foundation. That will continue. It will still be invested, but its money will be kept separate in the ledger than this 90% combined amount. The goal would be to draw about 3 or 4% annually in order to preserve the real value, and that we wouldn't eat into the principal on that foundation, that endowment. And then instead of having a prescribed amount for certain programs, it would unify the funding. That MCBC operations component would be folded into the MCBC operating budget. So we ran over this at some town halls. The people that attended were supportive of this. So this is what we're proposing for the meeting this year. In closing, I'd like to give thanks again to the Clearbrook Mennonite for writing into their bylaws to bestow this gracious gift to MCBC, and we hope that this plan will allow that endowment to continue to fund the work of MCBC into the future. Thank you.